A ruthless billionaire tried to frame my brother for her organized scheme, never realizing she had just hand-delivered the evidence of her downfall to my garage. She thought I was just a lowly mechanic, but I was about to ensure she faced a huge sentence for her crimes. I've spent 15 years becoming the best mechanic in this city, but to someone like Victoria Vance, I was just a grease stain on the sidewalk. I was under the chassis of a vintage Mustang, the smell of oil and old metal my only company, when the screech of high-end tires echoed through my garage. A matte black Italian supercar pulled in, smoke billowing from the hood, coughing like it was on its last breath. I rolled out from under the Mustang, wiping my hands on a rag. Before I could even stand up, she was out of the car. Victoria Vance. I recognized her instantly from the business magazines, the ice queen of the tech world, a CEO known for her ruthless mergers and even more ruthless personality. She looked at my shop with a sneer that suggested she'd rather be in a landfill. Then her eyes landed on me. "Are you the one in charge of this establishment?" she asked, her voice dripping with a condescension so thick you could clog an intake manifold with it. She didn't wait for an answer. "My car is overheating. I have a merger meeting in 40 minutes that is worth more than this entire block. Fix it. Now." I took a breath, trying to keep my professional cool. "I'll have to run a diagnostic, ma'am. If it's overheating, it could be anything from a blown gasket to a coolant leak." She stepped closer, the heels of her designer boots clicking sharply on the concrete. She looked at my dark skin, then at the grease on my forehead, and let out a short, mocking laugh. "A diagnostic? Listen, I don't need a lecture from someone who probably barely finished high school. I need you to turn a wrench and get this thing moving. Do you even know what kind of engine is in there, or do you only handle rusted-out trucks from the 90s? I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't snap. "I know exactly what's in there, Ms. Vance, and I know that if you drive another mile, that engine is going to seize and turn your $500,000 investment into a very expensive paperweight." She checked her gold watch, her face twisting in annoyance. "You people are all the same. Slow, lazy, and looking for a handout. Fine. You have 20 minutes. If it's not fixed by then, I'll make sure the city pulls your permit for environmental hazards. I have friends in high places, mechanic. Don't test me." She stormed off to the corner of the shop, pacing back and forth on her phone, barking orders at some unfortunate assistant. I shook my head and popped the hood. The heat was intense, but as I started looking deeper, something felt off. This wasn't just a mechanical failure. As I moved a carbon fiber shroud, my hand brushed against something that didn't belong in a factory-spec engine bay. Tucked near the firewall was a small lead-lined pouch attached with a heavy-duty magnet. My heart hammered against my ribs. I carefully pulled it out and opened the seal. Inside weren't tools or spare parts. It was several small vacuum-sealed packages filled with a crystalline substance, forbidden substances. This wasn't just a breakdown. This car was being used to transport high-value contraband. But then I saw something even worse. Taped to the bottom of the pouch was a burner phone. It buzzed in my hand. A message flashed on the screen. "The organized scheme is moving. Plant the evidence at the warehouse before the internal check arrives. Make sure the brother takes the fall." My blood ran cold. My younger brother, Andre, worked security at the very warehouse Victoria's company was about to acquire. They weren't just moving substances. They were framing someone to cover up a massive internal theft. They were planning to send my brother to prison for decades just to clean up their books. I looked over at Victoria. She was still on her phone, laughing about how she was going to crush the opposition. She thought I was just a lowly mechanic, someone too ignorant to notice her secrets. She had no idea that she had just hand-delivered the evidence of her own downfall to the one person who had everything to lose. I looked at the car, then at the forbidden substances in my hand, and finally at the arrogant woman who thought she could walk all over me. A slow, cold realization washed over me. I wasn't going to just fix her car. I was going to give her exactly what she deserved. I reached into my toolbox, but I didn't grab a wrench. I grabbed a specialized scanning tool I used for high-end security systems. As I began to work, I noticed Victoria watching me from the corner of her eye, a smirk of triumph on her face as if she'd bullied me into submission. 5 minutes, mechanic, she shouted. Don't make me come over there. I looked up at her, a calm smile spreading across my face that seemed to catch her off guard. Oh, don't worry, Miss Vance. I'm making sure everything is exactly where it needs to be. You're going to have a ride you'll never forget. I finished the repair and slammed the hood shut. But as she reached for her keys, I held them just out of reach, my eyes locking onto hers. You know, Victoria, you mentioned you have friends in high places. It's funny, so do I, but mine don't wear suits. Her expression shifted from arrogance to sudden, sharp suspicion. What are you talking about? Give me my keys. I leaned in close, my voice a low, dangerous whisper. I found the package, Victoria, and I found the phone. I know about the organized scheme, and I know about my brother. The color drained from her face, her eyes darting toward the car. She tried to lung for the keys, but I stepped back, tossing them into the air and catching them with a grin. The car is fixed, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet garage. But I made a few adjustments. You should probably get going. That meeting starts soon, and I've already called someone who is very interested in your cargo. Just then, the sound of distant sirens began to wail, growing louder by the second, heading straight for our location. Victoria's eyes widened in pure terror as she realized the unthinkable thing I had done while her hood was open. Victoria's face went from a pale mask of fury to a ghostly white of pure terror. The sirens were screaming now, echoing off the brick walls of the surrounding alleyways. She looked at the small packages of forbidden substances in my hand, then at the burner phone, and finally back at me. The arrogance that had defined her just minutes ago had vanished, replaced by the frantic, twitching eyes of a cornered animal. You don't understand, she hissed, her voice trembling. That's not mine. I didn't know that was in there. I'm being framed by my rivals. Please, you have to believe me. Save it for the Internal Security Service, Victoria, I said, my voice as cold as the steel tools on my bench. I saw the messages on that phone. You weren't being framed. You were the one doing the framing. You were going to use my brother, a kid who has never had so much as a parking ticket, to take the fall for your organized scheme. You were going to let him face an enormous shock, decades behind bars, just so you could balance your dirty books. She took a step toward me, reaching into her designer bag. For a second, I thought she was going for a weapon, but she pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills. There's 10,000 here. It's all I have on me. I can get you more. 1 million, 2 million. Just give me the phone and those packages. I'll make sure your brother is promoted. I'll make him a vice president. Just let me get out of here before they arrive. I looked at the money, then laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound. You really think everyone has a price, don't you? You think you can just buy your way out of destroying a family. My brother is a human being, not a pawn in your corporate games. The sirens were right outside the gate now. Blue and red lights began to pulse against the grease-stained windows of my shop. Victoria's breathing became shallow. She looked around the garage, desperate for an exit, and then her eyes landed on her car. She realized I still had the keys in my hand. In a sudden, desperate burst of movement, she lunged at me. She wasn't a fighter, but she was fueled by pure, unadulterated panic. She managed to claw at my hand, and the keys fell, skittering across the concrete floor. She dove for them, her expensive suit scraping against the oil-slicked ground. Before I could grab her, she had the keys and was scrambling into the driver's seat of the supercar. "You're a dead man!" she screamed over the roar of the engine as it kicked back to life. "I have people who handle problems like you. You and your brother are going to disappear." She slammed the car into reverse, tires shrieking as she flew out of the garage bay, narrowly missing a row of parked cars. She didn't even look back as she sped toward the street. I stood there, calmly wiping my hands on my rag. I didn't chase her. I didn't even flinch. Because Victoria Vance was so blinded by her own ego, she hadn't listened to what I told her. I said I had made adjustments. As she reached the end of the block, she slammed on the gas to pull out into traffic, intending to disappear into the city before the internal security teams could cut her off. But as she hit 60 miles per hour, a high-pitched electronic hum began to emit from the car's speakers. I pulled my own phone out of my pocket and tapped a single icon on the screen. In the distance, I saw her brake lights flash, but the car didn't slow down. I hadn't just fixed the cooling system. I had tapped into the car's advanced electronic control unit. Using a bypass kit, I had linked her vehicle's diagnostic port to a remote access app. I now had total control over the car's speed, its locks, and its GPS. Victoria's car began to veer, not toward the highway, but toward the very warehouse where the internal check was currently taking place. I watched the little red dot on my screen move steadily toward the trap, but then my phone vibrated with an incoming call. It wasn't the police. It wasn't my brother. It was an unknown, encrypted number. I answered it. "Hello? You've interfered with the very high-stakes organized scheme, mechanic," a distorted, gravelly voice said. "Victoria Vance is a small part of a much larger network. By taking control of that car, you haven't just caught a criminal. You've intercepted a shipment of illegal weapons that was never meant to be found. And right now, our radicals are 5 minutes away from your shop to make sure that evidence, and the man who found it, is eliminated." I looked toward the front of my shop. 3 dark SUVs with tinted windows were turning the corner, blocking both ends of the street. They weren't turning on sirens, they were turning off their headlights. The engines of the 3 SUVs idling outside my shop sounded heavy, modified for high-speed pursuits. I knew I had less than 60 seconds before the radicals inside those vehicles stormed my garage. I wasn't a fighter, but this was my territory. I knew every loose floorboard, every high-pressure line, and every gallon of flammable fluid in this building. I reached for the main control panel of the shop's hydraulic system. As the first group of men in tactical gear stepped out of their vehicles, I hit the override. The heavy steel security shutters slammed shut with a thunderous bang, locking them out and locking me in. But they weren't going to let a door stop them. I could hear them using a heavy ram against the metal. "You're making this harder on yourself, mechanic," the voice on the phone growled. "Just give us the encrypted device and the remote access codes, and maybe we'll let your brother live through the night." "You already made a mistake," I said into the phone, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "You assumed I was just some guy under a car. But I'm the one who designed the security network for this entire industrial district. You're not just at my shop, you're in my trap." With a flick of a switch on my tablet, I activated the remote override for Victoria's car, which was now only 2 miles away from the warehouse. I didn't just steer it. I activated the car's internal emergency beacon, a high-frequency signal designed to alert the internal security service to a vehicle theft in progress. Back at the shop, the front shutters began to buckle. The radicals were using specialized cutting tools. I moved to the back of the garage where a massive 1950s industrial air compressor sat. I loosened the safety valve and aimed the nozzle toward the entrance. The moment the steel door gave way and the 3 men burst inside, I didn't reach for a weapon. I reached for the valve. A blast of high-pressure air, mixed with a fine mist of industrial degreaser and metal shavings, hit them like a physical wall. They were blinded, coughing, and stumbling back into the oil-slicked floor I had prepared earlier. While they struggled to find their footing, I tapped the final command on my tablet. Victoria Vance's supercar didn't just arrive at the warehouse. It drove itself straight through the loading dock doors and came to a dead stop right in front of the Internal Security Services inspection team. The trunk popped open automatically. The lead-lined pouches, the burner phone with all the messages linking Victoria to the organized scheme, and the illegal weapons she had been unknowingly transporting were all laid out like a gift for the authorities. The scene at the warehouse was chaos. Victoria was screaming, trying to explain that she was the victim. But the evidence was undeniable. The burner phone contained her own voice memos, her own fingerprints, and her own digital signatures. The Ice Queen was caught in a trap of her own making. Back at the shop, the sirens I had heard earlier weren't just passing by. They were the response to the emergency beacon I had triggered. Half a dozen black sedans from the Internal Security Service swerved into my alley, pinning the 3 SUVs against the wall. The radicals, still blinded by the degreaser mist, were dragged out and restrained. A high-ranking officer in a gray suit stepped into the garage, looking around at the mess, then at me. "Are you the one who sent the data packet?" he asked, holstering his weapon. "I am," I said, finally letting out the breath I'd been holding. "The evidence against Victoria Vance and the group is on that burner phone. My brother, Andre. Is he safe?" The officer nodded. "We intercepted the team sent to frame him 10 minutes ago. He's shaken up, but he's fine. He's actually the one who told us where to find you." An hour later, as the sun began to rise over the city, I sat on the bumper of the vintage Mustang, watching them tow Victoria's supercar away. She was being led into a transport vehicle in handcuffs, her expensive suit ruined, her reputation shattered. As she passed my shop, she looked at me with a hatred so deep it would have burned if I cared. I just raised my coffee mug to her. "You told me I was just a grease stain, Victoria," I called out as the doors of the transport van closed. "But it's funny how the thing you look down on is usually the thing that trips you up. The Ice Queen was facing a huge srock, decades in prison for her part in the organized scheme. My brother was not only safe but was being hailed as a key witness who helped take down a major criminal network. I looked around my shop. It was a mess, and I had a lot of work to do. But for the first time in 15 years, the air felt clean. I picked up my wrench, looked at the Mustang, and got back to work. Because at the end of the day, I'm a mechanic, and I know exactly how to fix things that are broken, no matter how high up they think they are."